Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Orbit, and today we're going to talk about a book that I read recently. It is Joyful Militancy by Carla Bergman and Nick Montgomery. It is a guide to fighting fascism without creating more fascism. And I'm going to do my best to talk about what I took away from the book and give you a brief summary so you know what's going on. I actually asked my sister, I was like, hey, you should read this book. And my sister picked it up and immediately put it down because she said there was too much philosophy in it. So part of this is for her. So, joyful militancy. To start off, we're going to describe what joyful militancy is by going through 4 definitions. First is the empire. The book collectively refers to oppressive forces as the empire. So I'm bookmarked it on page 48. It says that the empire includes interlocking systems of settler colonialism, white supremacy, the state, capitalism, ableism, ageism, and heteropatriarchy. So it's not really a mystery who we're talking about here. Our president is a fascist. Our country is founded on colonization, and also this year we've seen tremendous amount of excessive force and police brutality resulting in deaths. So in resisting the empire, I think it's pretty clear the forces that we're trying to foster a resistance against. The second definition is sadness. And this is the philosophy that my sister was talking about. We are redefining sadness in this book to kind of meet the needs of joyful militancy. So when you are sad, think about what does that mean? Usually you feel kind of hopeless, you're not able to do a lot, you're tired, run down. And this is the sadness that they're talking about, is your ability to affect and also be affected is reduced. Your capacity for enacting change on the world is reduced. So if we define sadness as reduced capability to enact change, to affect and to be affected, then joy, in contrast, is maximizing your ability to be an agent of change in the world. Now we're going to talk about the joy in joyful militancy. The book defines joy on page 64 to 65 as a process that is transformative, dangerous, painful, and powerful, but also somewhat elusive. Joy isn't being happy. It's being present and activated, galvanized into creating change instead of being discouraged and disabled by the empire. An example of this is being joyful means that in both good times and bad, you have the presence to see the forces at play and your influence on them. Joy is sustained energy. It is hope. It is the process of dismantling oppressive forces and growing. Even though I am exhausted and angry about the United States healthcare system every day, my joy lies in seeking paths to reform that. To make it as concrete as possible, joy is just your increased capacity to enact change. Now, we got the joy down. We have labeled the empire. What is militancy? When you think of militancy, you probably think about the military. You think about rigid rules. You think about possibly a warrior mentality. And joyful militancy is about redefining this in more like community-focused and tender terms. Being militant doesn't necessarily mean exerting your power over others. In the book, they define militancy as lived process of transformative struggle. Militancy is hard to define because it makes us think of the military. Being militant and being militant about joy, to me, means holding yourself accountable towards making real change. Militancy is attention and action. It is less about controlling others and more about holding yourself to your values. For example, when the George Floyd protests started, my parents thought they were unjustified and also riotous. They believe this partially because of how the media was portraying everything. And so I have a pretty good relationship with my parents, so I reached out and I talked to them and I was like, hey, like, where are you getting these ideas? Do you understand what like the context is? Are you aware of systemic racism and its effects? And through that dialogue, we were able to just kind of reach a better understanding of the protests. And to me, this was a form of militancy and joyful militancy because it was me seeing a problem with my parents misunderstanding what was going on and then holding true to my values to stand up for what I believe in and saying, hey, like, are you properly informed? Yeah, the militancy was the act of enacting change and starting that transformative process with my parents. The main thing is I just wanted to make sure that I didn't let my parents get off the hook for being complicit in police brutality. These are the general definitions of the book, and the chapters after, once they define the concepts, they explain strategies and theories to help you flesh out what joyful militancy looks like in different communities and potentially for yourself. And so I'm going to talk about two of those things today, but I highly recommend picking up the book, seeing as it goes into further detail. One way to fight fascism without creating more fascism is establishing meaningful friendships. The reason that this is an effective strategy is that the empire attempts to isolate us by taking away our ability to enact change. It creates the idea of like the nuclear family that is insulated from everything around us and that the only people that matter are the people who are your direct bloodline. The creation of friendships and communities that support each other is an act of rebellion. Friendships that matter, where there is something at stake worth protecting, creates a relationship that challenges the power of the empire. One example of this is my girlfriend Cheyenne has this Twitch stream that she started doing. And the Twitch stream is like a really incredible community because Cheyenne's playing video games, a bunch of people come into chat, and we're all hanging out together. And it's a form of just remote friendship. And if you ever hang out in the chat, which I recommend, it's some of the most wholesome interaction I've ever seen. Cheyenne's Twitch stream is the opposite of an isolating experience. Cheyenne's ability to create this familial environment, in my eyes, is a form of joyful militancy. After friendship, another chapter explores undoing rigid radicalism. Being rigid means that you're destined to break. Outlining universal rules, ideas, and other methods of control doesn't increase our capacity for joy, but instead oppresses and limits us. To overburden yourself with rules and dogma is to reduce your ability to affect and be affected. To me, this means instead of creating absolute generalizations about what your radicalism should look like, you should instead engage in a process of continuous testing of your assumptions and growing your understanding of your community in order to serve them better. It is the act of being open to new ideas. An example of this, of undoing rigid radicalism, would be learning to unlearn. I believed myself to be an agent of good, as a lot of people see themselves as like the hero of their own story. And I got swept up into like entrepreneurship and startup culture where we all believed that total domination was the goal. However, just in a process of like learning and being connected with communities in real life and online, I learned that the business sphere and its culture was oppressive and damaging. I don't know if I've found a solution to this problem, but I know I'm trying to be fluid and open to new ideas as I unlearn my internalized colonizer. And I'm doing this by trying to empower others to own their own corners of the internet. In sum, these are some of the things that I took away from the book. They may not be like to the T, maybe exactly what the author intended, but I thought it was important to share what I was reading and what I was learning. I recommend reading this book if you are interested in activism during a time where our governing officials are visibly corrupt and dismissive of our problems and needs. Change can happen in small steps and large. And joyful militancy helps us put names to the obstacles that we face in creating a more just and equitable system of governance. Grab a copy wherever you can. I am a little bit nervous about this vlog out because one of the authors follows me on Twitter. Hello, Carla. But yeah, I hope you found this useful and interesting, and I will see you at the next one.
Great work! I love from your studio audience.